Salvete discipuli, hodie spectatis lecturam undecimam capitis unum et triginta. Cum Clauses, Ferō. Hodie discemus primum vocabula capitis triginta unum. Deinde grammaticam capitis. We'll learn about cum clauses, temporal cum clauses, circumstantial cum clauses, causal cum clauses, and concessive cum clauses. Then we'll learn the irregular verb, ferō, fera, tuli, latum. Primum discemus verba vocabulorum capitis unum et triginta. In hoc capita sunt quinque verba: doleo, dormio, ferō, invideo, occido. Primum verbum: doleo, dolere, dolui, dolitorum. Petrus genu dolet. Quid significat doleo? Proximum verbum: dormio, dormire, dormivi, dormitum. Ecce feles, feles dormit. Quid significat dormio? Proximum verbum: ferō, fera, tuli, latum. And I'll cut into English here. So ferō means to bring or to carry or to bear. And what you see here are its various compounds. Ad ferō, ad fera, to bring to. Con ferō, con fera, to bring with. Okay? Offerō, offera, to offer. Referō, refera, to bring back. Okay? Etc. Proximum verbum: invideo, invidere, invidi, invisum. Avis prasina duobus aliis avibus invidet. Avis prasina plena invidiae est. Quid significat invideo? Ecce tres aves, ecce avis prasina, ecce alii duo aves. Avis prasina duobus aliis avibus invidet. Avis prasina plena invidiae est. Ultimum verbum: occido, occidere, occidi, ocassum. In oriente oritor sol, occiditque in occidente. Quid significat occido? Ecce sol, ecce occidens, ecce oriens. Sol oritor in oriente, et occidit in occidente. Nunc discemus nomina vocabulorum capitis unum et triginta. In hoc capita sunt quinque nomina: auxilium, digitus, exilium, invidia, vinum. Primum nomen: auxilium, auxilii. Aragornus dicit Gondorum auxilium vocare, et Theodenus dicit Rohannem responsoram esse. Quid significat auxilium? Proximum nomen: digitus, digiti. Quique manui humano sunt quinque digiti. Unus, duo, tres, quatuor, quinque digiti in manu humano. Quid significat? Proximum nomen: exilium, exilii. Napoleo ille imperator Francorum. In exilium bis pulsus est. Primum in insulam Elbam, deinde in sanctam Helenam. Quid significat exilium? Proximum nomen: invidia, invidiae. Avis prasina duobus aliis avibus invidet. Avis prasina plena invidia est. Quid significat invidia? Ultimum nomen. Vinum, vini. Ecce vinum. Ecce vinum rubrum. Non vinum album. Quid significat vinum? Nunc discemus adjectiva vocabulorum capitis unum et triginta. In hoc capita est unum adjectivum, mediocris. Primum et ultimum solum adjectivum. Mediocris, mediocre. Puer altitudinis mediocris est. Quid significat mediocris? Nunc discemus alias partes loquendi vocabulorum capitis triginti unum. In hoc capita sunt duo adverbia, semel, usque, una praepositio, apud, et una conjunctio, cum. Primum adverbium, semel. Nobis cum semel occidit brevis lux. Nox est perpetua una dormienda. Quid significat semel? Ultimum adverbium, usque. Quo usque tandem adultere, Catilina, patientia nostra? Quid significat usque? Sola praepositio, apud. Cena bispene mi fabula apud me. Quid significat apud? Sola conjunctio, cum. Nobis cum semel occidit brevis lux. Nox est perpetua una dormienda. Okay, so we'll actually talk a bit more about Ferō, fera, tuli, latum to start off the grammar part of this lesson. And as you see here, it is an irregular verb, which is why it gets kind of its own little unit here. And it's an irregular verb mainly for how it conjugates in the present indicative, as well as the imperative, as well as what it looks like in the infinitive. So here's kind of the four ways that it's weird. So if you look at Ferō, fera, tuli, latum, you can probably deduce that it is a third conjugation verb. And for the most part, it behaves like a regular third conjugation verb. But you'll notice that that infinitive, that second principal part, looks kind of weird. Fera, it might have begun its life as ferera, okay, a more regular third conjugation verb, but that is, but then it's sort of compressed into fera, okay? And the same can be said for its conjugation in the present active indicative. Ferō, fers, fert, ferimus, vertis, ferunt. Okay, so this verb means to carry, to bring, to bear. Okay, so Ferō, I bring, fers, you bring. Maybe it was once feris, but then it shortened. And fert might have been ferit. Okay, and fertis, y'all bring. Okay, so I underline the bits where it's weird. It doesn't have a connecting vowel. In the present passive indicative, if you look over on the right, you'll see where it's weird in the second and third singular. Feris, you are brought, you are carried. Fertor, it is brought. Okay. The present active the present imperative also is weird. It's one of those third conjugation imperatives that doesn't end in a short e in the present singular. In the singular imperative, so it's just fair, bring, okay, sort of like duk or dik, okay, or fak. And ferta also is weird, bring in the plural. Feri is the present passive infinitive, and that's actually to be expected for a third conjugation verb in the present passive infinitive. You just replace the short e at the end with a long I, to be brought, okay? You'll also notice, since you might be curious, is what the hell is going on with the last two principal parts. tuli latum. So this is similar to tolo tolera sustuli sub latum, where it seems that there were two verbs that were independent of each other, and at some point the Romans were like, they're just going to use Ferō and Ferō, the first two principal parts of one verb, and the last two principal parts of another verb to mean essentially the same thing. That's life. Anyway, the rest of this lesson will be devoted to cum clauses. Okay, so these are essentially subordinate clauses that are set off by the conjunction cum. Okay, so you might have learned cum as a preposition, okay, meaning with or along with or together with, that takes the ablative. Well, cum can also be a conjunction that sets off a cum clause, just like ut or ne might set off a purpose or result clause. Cum might be a conjunction that sets off a cum clause. So what is a cum clause? Well, it's a subordinate clause that relates the action of the main clause to another action set off by cum as a conjunction. Okay, what do we mean by this? Well, there are four types: temporal, circumstantial, causal, and concessive. And only one of those does the verb in the subordinate clause take the indicative rather than the subjunctive mood. So in that way, a temporal cum clause is like a relative clause in that it's one of the only subordinate clauses that has the verb in the indicative. Okay, so a temporal, the verb takes the indicative, and it means, and the cum can be translated as when or while. Circumstantial, causal, and concessive, the verb takes the subjunctive, okay, and they can mean when, while, since, because, or although, depending on the context. So let's talk about each one of these independently and use examples. So let's start with temporal cum clauses. Okay, these are the easiest ones because the verb is in the clause is indicative, so that's nice. You use a temporal cum clause to indicate coincidental actions. Okay, two actions that are being related in time, but that's about it. So it shows coincidental actions with no essential connection between them. Okay, basically, while this was happening, and those two things have nothing to do with each other. Okay, so you can translate cum as when or while here, right? Hence, the word temporal refers to tempus, meaning time, right? So here is a temporal cum clause. Cum Homerus in Graecia vivebat, Romulus Romam condidit. Okay, so this can be translated as when or while Homer was living in Greece, Romulus founded Rome. Okay, so our main clause here, okay, is Romulus Romam condidit. Okay, this is an independent clause. Romulus founded Rome. Our dependent clause, our subordinate clause, is the cum clause. Okay, that depends upon this other independent clause. When or while Homer was living in Greece. Okay, so these are two actions that are being related to each other in time, but in time only, because you can see that Romulus founding Rome and Homer living in Greece have no effect on each other. Okay, Homer living in Greece had no effect on Romulus founding Rome. These are just coincidental actions. Hence, it's a temporal cum clause. Okay? All right. The last three will have the subjunctive, and they will indicate actions that have more of a relationship to each other. Okay, so let's start with circumstantial cum clauses. Okay, it's all in the name. These indicate the circumstances in which an action occurs. Okay, in other words, it provides the circumstances or context in which an action occurs. Okay, so you can translate cum as when or while, just like a temporal cum clause, but you can also say since, right? So here's an example. Cum Romulus orationem haberet, a senatoribus necatus est. Okay? When or while Romulus was delivering a speech, he was killed by the senators. Okay? He was murdered by the Senate. So, what the cum clause is doing here is it's indicating the context or the circumstances in which he was killed, in which the action of the independent clause occurred, right? So there's a bit more of a connection between these actions. This supplies the context, the circumstances under which the murder happened, okay? let's use another example here. Cum senatores id fecissent, proculus dixit eum deum factum esse. Okay? When the senators had done this, Proculus said that he had become a god. Okay? So again, in the circumstances of them having killed him, Proculus went ahead and said, oh, he actually was deified. Okay? So again, the circumstances here. The other thing I want you to notice is that cum clauses, just like any subordinate clause that takes the subjunctive, is following the sequence of tenses. Okay? So necatus est and dixit here are both perfect. Okay? So we're in the historical sequence. Okay? Haberet here is in the imperfect because it's simultaneous action with the killing. Fecissent is in the pluperfect subjunctive, okay, because it's indicating something that had already happened before the saying here. Okay, so sequence of tenses applies. Okay, that was circumstantial. How about a causal cum clause? Again, all in name. This indicates the cause or reason for a thing happening. Okay, it provides the cause, exactly what I said. So you can translate the cum here as since or because. Cum proculus magnam auctoritatem apud eos haberet, Romani ei crediderunt. Since or because Proculus had a lot of influence among them, the Romans believed him. Okay? So, in other words, this is providing the explanation for why the independent clause happened. The Romans believed him because Proculus had a lot of clout with them. Make sense? So it's a causal cum clause because it's providing the rationale. Okay, you can translate the cum as since or because. All right, last one. Concessive cum clause. Okay, it's all in a name. This is a cum clause where you concede, okay, something. Shows an action in spite of which another action occurred. Okay, this is where you translate cum meaning although. All right, it'll make more sense when we see an example. Okay, and this is also something that often has signaling language like the word tamen, okay, which means however, to kind of tell you that this is going to be concessive rather than the other ones. Okay, cum Romulus fratrem necaveret, Romani tamen putant eum bonum regem fuisse. Okay, although Romulus killed his brother, the Romans nevertheless think that he was a good king. Okay? So in other words, despite the fact that he committed fratricide, the Romans still had a good opinion of him as a ruler. Okay? So in other words, this is showing something that is in spite of which the main clause is the case. Okay? Again, notice the sequence of tenses. Putant is present, so we're in the primary sequence. Necaret is in the perfect subjunctive, okay, because it is a prior action to the main verb here. Okay, so there you go. So again, temporal for coincidental actions, verb takes the indicative. Circumstantial for giving the context of an action, verb takes the subjunctive. Causal, indicating the reason for an action, okay, verb takes the subjunctive. And concessive, okay, showing kind of an action that happens in spite of the other action, okay, and verb taking the subjunctive, okay. So hopefully this helps you keep them straight. The Romans, Latin literature uses cum clauses all the damn time, so get used to them, okay. And with that, valete discipuli.